How's everyone today?
Great.
Good. It's good to be here today. I appreciate a couple of things this morning. I appreciate the word of encouragement about saying to our soul it is well, that our circumstances can't dictate to us how we're going to be, and how we're going to live, and how we're going to act. I appreciate Hunter expressing that this morning, because some days you just wake up and you just don't want to do what you're supposed to do. You just feel upset. You just want to cry, and that's okay. But you know, the good news is not only are we going to make it, not only if we make the decision to say it as well, we're not just going to survive, but we're going to thrive. Amen. We're going to succeed. We're going to have victory. And that's why we're here this morning, to proclaim and to celebrate the victory that God has given us today. Amen. And each and every day. Today we are victorious. Today we can maybe be crying in the morning, but we'll be celebrating by the afternoon. You know, it's amazing in our life how we surround ourselves with things that make our lives better and more comfortable, right? I mean, think about all the creature comforts that we have and all the things that we have that make our life easier, or at least supposedly easier. What's that? Your Roomba? Yes, that's right. You don't have to vacuum anymore. They just came out, I know, with a Roomba-type lawnmower, too, where you just set it in your yard and it just roams around and mows your yard for you. I mean, long gone are the days where we had to grow our own food or hunt for our own food and then prepare it however you prepare hunted or grown food. We go to the grocery store, and a lot of times we can buy stuff that's already not only completely grown and prepared for us, but most of the time already cooked if we want to. Or we can go to restaurants and do the same. Think about just what you have in your life or on your person right now, from smartphones to other kinds of technology, all completely designed to make our life easier, right? And yet, oftentimes, we're still the same way, feeling the same way. How many pictures have you seen of someone in a closet full of clothes, you know, saying, I have nothing to wear? My closet doesn't even hold all my clothes. Actually, my closet is full of clothes that I don't wear. All the clothes that I wear go from the you know, there's like 3 steps. It's like clean clothes go in the clothes basket on the floor. Then clothes that are not dirty enough to go into the dirty clothes basket go to the chair. So those can be worn again until they end up going to the clothes basket, to the washing machine, and then back to the floor. It's like a 4-step cycle where my closet's completely out of the picture. It's an amazing time we live in. Have you ever stopped to think about all these things that make our life easier? Make our life better? What did we do before smartphones and Wi-Fi? I mean, it's amazing to me how often, you know, with constant streaming. I remember we were talking about cell phone packages plans the other day. You remember when you had to have minutes? I mean, even if you were lucky enough to have a cell phone, then it was like, don't call me until after 9 o'clock at night when it's nights and weekends free. Or, you know, I'm almost out of minutes. I mean, long gone are the days of minutes. I mean, is there anybody in here that still has a plan that's not completely, unlimited data? I mean, almost everybody is unlimited data these days. And why? Because we're constantly streaming. Amen. We're constantly doing things. What was it like? Do you remember what it was like to not be connected to the information superhighway all the time? Yeah. I mean, it seems like a fading memory. How did we travel as kids without the ability to stream Netflix the entire time? I mean, remember the road games we used to have to play where you'd have to spot out-of-state license plates or count cars or God forbid you get one of those little magic pens, the water pens that I mean, kids don't appreciate road trips these days. And what you had to go through to prepare for these. And we parents, how did we ever get anywhere without GPS to tell us where to go? Yeah. I mean, maps, yeah. Remember the AAA trip things that you'd have to pull out and you'd have to say, okay, you'd be watching, and then someone would have to navigate. We don't have to have a navigator anymore. Siri does it for us in whatever comforting voice we choose. Do you remember a time when we had to look things up on the dictionary, in the dictionary, or God forbid the encyclopedia? And what did we do before Google? Google's incredible. I mean, we actually had to know stuff before Google. I mean, I'll be having conversations daily. They have a big policy at work about you're not supposed to have your phones out while you're working and stuff like that. I totally disregard that because every single conversation I have often requires me to say, well, let's just check Google and find out what, because you're talking sports, you're talking politics, you're talking this. I mean, we were sitting there watching the Kentucky Derby yesterday, and we had a big debate about how many Triple Crown winners there were. Well, I mean, 1948, 1978, something. It was like, no, I know there was one recently. I mean, 30 seconds, not even 5 seconds. I found out American Pharoah in 2015 was the last one to win the Triple Crown. Before that, it was 1970 something, 74.
78.
Technology is incredible. Life in the 21st century is incredible. Every single day, we spend hours functioning under the influence of a high-tech world. Have you ever taken a minute to process all the technology we use every single day? And it's growing at an unprecedented rate.
Amen.
Think about it. Driverless cars, faster internet connection, new inventions all the time, all with the design to either save time, save energy, or save lives. This is our reality, and it's staggering. Do you know that every year there's a giant trade show called the Consumer Electronics Show? And what it does is it features the newest and greatest inventions that are being introduced. This past January, the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, was in Las Vegas. I'm not sure if it's Las Vegas every year, but this past year was in January. And tech companies from all over the world converged to show off new things. New things such as L'Oreal's UV Sense. This is a thing that L'Oreal is putting out. It's a tiny sensor capable of detecting ultraviolet exposure, and it's comfortable enough to wear on your fingernail. The sensor itself is battery-free, includes an NFC antenna, and a temperature sensor, and a UV sensor. That sensor, which can store up to 3 months' worth of data, passes information to an accompanying app whenever the wearer holds a device near his or her smartphone. The app will then keep track of your exposure levels and can provide tips for managing sun intake. Fingernail accessory that can help you avoid skin cancer.
Wow.
Also, this year they featured Samsung's brilliant new 146-inch TV called the Wall.
Wow.
The company is positioning it as the first modular TV, 146 inches. The Wall. Now, what's so amazing about the Wall is that Samsung can say that users can use that in any shape that they like. It can function also as a multi-purpose display. In a demo on the showroom floor, the TV displayed what looked like a smaller TV in the midst of the center screen, while the surrounding area was decorated to look like the wall that the TV was mounted on. So you can have the TV any size you like, with decorations. I'm sure you can have multiple pictures and images. Or, if you like, for the big game or full immersion video gaming, you could use the entire 146-inch screen. I know there's a few of you guys out here thinking, how soon is that hitting the market? Maybe you've already even heard of a device that they've recently unleashed. The Android device called the Movi smartphone. It includes an integrated projector that can project 720p videos in case you're not near a television and want to watch something bigger than on the palm of your hand.
Wow.
You set your phone up, projects it right on the wall, and you can watch full-size videos from your phone. It's incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. But you know what's most amazing about this Consumer Electronics Show this past year? Shortly after 11 a.m., on the second day of the show, the Consumer Electronics Show, which was the biggest tech show in the world, hit a snag. The lights went out in the part of the Las Vegas Convention Center, leaving both techie humans and their robots in the dark. For about 2 hours, people relied on their cell phone flashlights in order to look at all the high-tech stuff that's available to make our lives easier and more comfortable. One of the funniest situations occurred when the cell phone towers, they had cell phone towers set up where people could charge their phones, because of course you're flying through battery power as you're taking pictures and doing all this stuff. They had cell phone towers where people had plugged their phones in, had doors. When the power went out, the doors wouldn't open. So everyone in there is stuck with their dying cell phones in front of them because they're not being able to charge, but they can't even get to them. Wow. The things that they rely on most for flashlights and lights and stuff like that, they couldn't even get to their phones.
That's amazing.
You see, all the high-tech stuff in the world doesn't mean anything if we don't have electricity.
That's right.
It takes power in order for us to stay comfortable. I read that any major power outage would leave us completely helpless as a society within 96 hours. Wow. They broke it down. After so many hours of power outage, the cell phones, their battery, the cell phone batteries would die without being able to, I mean, even if you could charge them through solar power or whatever like that, the relay stations, the cell phone towers, eventually their battery backups would go out. Within 96 hours, you would lose all your refrigeration, so your food would go out. You would lose gas. There's no ability to pump gas.
Well, you don't have one.
Within 96 hours, we would go from being a completely functional society to completely in the dark ages. Now, we saw a little bit of that this past hurricane season when we lost power. And I've never seen that many people on the road. Traffic jams everywhere. Gas stations piled up, lines and lines, trying to get gas. Who has it? Who's going to run out before the power goes out? Once the power's out, you can't do anything. Nothing is worse than losing power during a storm. In a minute, you go from enjoying the power of nature displayed in a thunderstorm to literally being thrust into the dark ages. Scrambling around the house, trying to find candles, matches, a flashlight, anything that would help. Because nothing is working and life is at a standstill. Reminds me of the time that suddenly the electricity went off in the house of a blonde woman. She was startled by the darkness. She became a little panicked and went to look for a match. She searched her house, high and low, for some time with no success. So finally she got tired of looking for a match, so she just blew out her candle and went to sleep. Anyone remember who was the first person who thought that electricity could be harnessed by lightning? Ben Franklin, right. His infamous kite. Ben Franklin believed electricity could be harnessed from lightning. In 1752, he devised an experiment to test his theory. Although details of the experiment remain a little sketchy to this day, what he originally wanted to do was put a spire on top of a Philadelphia church. But after he thought about that in detail, he realized that his theory could be better tested if he used a kite rather than a stationary spire. So he made a kite. He extended a wire vertically about a foot from it. The apparatus was extended in the air by a length of string. Along the string was a metal key. Now, Ben Franklin hypothesized that the wire would draw electric fire from the thunderclouds, which then be conducted through the apparatus and contained in the key. Well, as we heard, he stood there in the storm flying a kite for some time, and menacing clouds were passing overhead, but there was no luck. So he became discouraged, and he was about to go home when suddenly he observed some of the threads on the string of his kite standing erect. Believing that this was caused to be the cause of electric current, he reached out his hand, touched his finger to the key, which did indeed contain some electricity, and received quite a shock. And it was based upon this landmark experiment that he invented the first lightning rod. He built one on top of his house. It was meant to attract lightning. They were connected to a series of bells that whenever an electric charge went through it, the bells would ring. It would produce sparks that would illuminate his house. And it was based upon his early experiments that became the foundations for the common battery that we use today. The other time, during that time, as Ben Franklin, there were other people who began to experiment with electricity. There was some Frenchmen who were curious about electrical currents. They wanted to know how fast it moved. So an abbot of a large monastery had volunteered his monks to be part of an experiment. The monks had taken a vow of obedience, so they had no choice. They lined up 1,000 of these monks, each holding the hand of the one next to him. The electric current was then applied to the first man in line, and according to an account of this experiment, every one of those 1,000 monks jumped into the air precisely at the same moment. Must have been quite a sight. I draw a few conclusions from this story. First, electricity moves with astonishing speed. Second, abbots in French monasteries in the 18th century had tremendous authority over the monks and their care. And thirdly, wouldn't it be wonderful if 1,000 people in the church today could get excited enough about something to jump in the air at the same time?
Wow, that'd be awesome.
It's hard to get that much cooperation in most churches today, isn't it? In fact, it's hard to even get a couple of Christians to agree on anything. With so much diversity in doctrine, differing preferences on how to worship, when to worship, and what do you do while you're worshiping, there's certainly a lot to discuss. And when there's a lot to discuss, there's usually a lot to disagree on. Remember, Jesus once made an interesting comment. He said that if 2 or 3 people are gathered in my name, he said, I will be there in their midst. 2 or 3, that's it? A small number. I think it's probably because Jesus knows the chances of 2 or 3 people getting together in one accord is even more of an amazing feat than the act of his presence joining them in supernatural manifestation.
Amen.
One big happy family. Isn't that what we're called to be, the church? What does Psalm 133 say? It says, how wonderful, how beautiful when brothers and sisters get along. It's like costly anointing oil, flowing down the head and beard, flowing down Aaron's beard, flowing down the collar of his priestly robes. It's like the dew on Mount Hermon, flowing down the slopes of Zion, for there the Lord commanded the blessing, life forever. When brothers and sisters get along, God says that is the blessing. Isn't it sad when there's dissension and fighting amongst Christians? The people that should be supporting each other and uplifting each other are wasting time, tearing each other down and belittling. This ought not be. Our scripture readings for today are a central theme. It surrounds a central theme, and that theme is love. Jesus' love for us. How he willingly lays down his life for his sheep. It's incredible. Love, sacrificial, unmerited love, unconditional love. See, this is the example that he set for us, for all of us. This is the reason why we're here. And why churches all over the world are filled today with people because of God's love for us and the example that he set. So what's our response to this love and sacrifice? How are we supposed to live our lives? Well, the shepherd cares for the sheep, but we, the sheep, don't we have some responsibility as well? I mean, we have to listen to the voice of the shepherd. We have to follow his commands. The shepherd has called us to love each other in the same manner that he first loved us. You see, we are called to be the family of God, to live together as one big household of faith, and our house is powered by a very specific type of electricity. Something that keeps our family warm in the days of winter. It keeps the lights of hope and the fires of peace burning brightly in the hearts of our spiritual home. The fuel that powers our house is what Scripture talks about over and over. Loving each other. Being different from the world. Love. John 13, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you love one another also. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. See, love is the electricity that lights the Christian household. Love is the one thing that sets us apart from the rest of the world. And it should. It should. Jesus said this is a new commandment. Why is it new? Why did Jesus say this is a new commandment? Because it goes against everything that we've been programmed to believe. Everything that we have been that's within us. It's a different commandment. Because what's within us? What kind of message does the world tell us? Well, the world preaches, look out for number one. Make sure you are comfortable. Make sure you're taken care of. Don't be afraid to step on a few heads on your climb to the top. Remember the old Rick Nelson song? Well, it's all right now. I've learned my lesson well. You see, you can't please everyone. So you what? You got to please yourself. Please yourself. Love yourself. Put yourself first in all things. That is the old commandment. That is what we're all accustomed to. And it's been around for a while, right? I mean, in fact, this idea goes all the way back to the dawn of time. Genesis 3 talks about it. The serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord had made. And he said to the woman, indeed, has God said to you, now you shall not eat from any tree of the garden. And the woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, or touch it, for you will certainly die. The serpent said to the woman, you will surely not die. For God knows that the day that you eat it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave it also to her husband with her, and he ate. A chance to be like God. To be bigger and more important than they already were. And how important were they? I mean, it wasn't enough that they had the entire planet to themselves. I mean, you talk about self-centered, they already had everything. And then they had gardens which they didn't plant, and watered itself, and fruit of all kinds, and animals that were nice to them, and they were nice. I mean, it was paradise. Literally paradise. And they wanted more. What a selfish attitude. You could walk around and pick any tree, fruit from any tree, and it was all through the garden. Pretty sweet life. But selfishness and evil desires found a way into the most perfect place ever created. And it never stopped snowballing until Jesus showed up. This is a new commandment, a brand new idea, to love each other. To love each other, that's it. To love each other, nothing more, just love. You know, Jesus said it way before the Beatles said it. All we need is love. One big happy family. Peter gives us the description of what it means to have our houses powered by love. In 1 Peter 3, he says this, to sum it all up, all of you should be of one mind. Sympathize with each other, love each other as brothers and sisters, be tender-hearted, and keep a humble attitude. Don't repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. This is what God has called you to do, and He will bless you for it. One big happy family. Well, you and I both know that even in the happiest of families, there's still some problems. I like the story of a little boy who was teaching his younger brother the Lord's Prayer, and he said to him, this is what Jesus taught us to pray. He said, you say, forgive our debts as we forgive those who are dead against us. I certainly hope that today none of us have anyone who is dead against us. And yet within the happiest families, there are bound to be conflicts. Paul advises us to watch our tongues, to pray for each other, to forgive each other, to love each other. A big, happy family. See, that's the ideal model for the church. But how do we recapture that harmonious relationship in the church today? Where do we find the electricity that will cause 100 or 1,000 of us to jump into the air all at the same time? I think we start by reminding ourselves of who we are and what we're all about. We do it by asking ourselves some very important questions every time we come together in worship. The first question that we need to ask every time we come together is this. He said, what can we do to help people love God more? Every day, if we had that attitude, what can I do to help people love God more? See, in the church, we're not in the business of building big, beautiful buildings. We're not in the business of producing ear-pleasing music, or even as surprising as it may be to you, we are not in the business of preaching great sermons. We are in the business, first of all, of helping people find God and experience His love. That's what we're all about. That's the bottom line. And the reason is because many people are afraid of God. They're afraid of entrusting their lives to Him for fear that He will place some intolerable burden on Him. I've said it before, and I've always loved this analogy. I heard an evangelist once say this, and I thought it was brilliant because it really got to, especially in my teenage years, it really got to the heart of what I was worried about. He said that he was completely afraid to sell out to God because he believed that once he did, that God would immediately, once he said, I commit myself to you, God, God would immediately send him to a foreign country on a mission, and as he put it, he would end up pining away, dying of malaria while his 400-pound tribal wife slapped him around the mud hut. That was his fear. And the truth is, that was what I was afraid of too. Not that so many words, but it was like, God, I'll live for you. Okay, good. I've got big plans, and it's not going to be fun. I mean, that was how we think a lot of times. It sounds funny, but we all have similar fears to one extent or another. I think deep down, at some point, we truly believe that God has ill will towards us. That once we commit our lives, He'll throw back His head, let out a peal of maniacal laugh, and quickly point out all the fine prints that we failed to read when we signed the contract. Bill Wright, the founder of Campus Crusade, once dealt with this in a beautiful way. He said, my wife and I have 2 grown sons. Suppose that when they were little boys and they had come to greet me when I returned home from a trip, and they said, we love you, Dad. We've missed you. We're so excited about being home. We've been talking together, and we've decided that we will do anything that you want us to do. From now on, you issue the command, and we will obey without any questions. We just want to please you. What do you think? Dr. Bright said. would have been my response to their expression of love? If I had responded the way many people think that God would respond if we said the same thing to Him, Lord, I'll do anything for you. I'll go anywhere you want me to do. I would have taken them by the shoulders, looked at them with an evil eye, and said, I've just been waiting to hear you say that. Now I'm going to make you regret your decision to trust as long as you live. I am going to take all the fun out of your lives. I will make you miserable as long as you both shall live. No, he said, I would not have said that. I would have put my arms around them, given them a big hug, and said, Zach, Brad, I love you too. And I want to justify your faith in me. I want to be a better father to you. I want to do everything I can to help you find full and meaningful lives. Do you really think, he says, that God would respond any other way to your pledge of love and loyalty to Him? See, my primary purpose as your pastor is to tell you that God loves you and help you respond in love to His call. Philip Brooks preached a sermon once on the phrase from the New Testament that said, the phrase, make the men sit down, before the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus sent His disciples to say, make the men sit down, and he fashioned an entire sermon out of that phrase. He said the people were pushing and surging around Jesus, and in order for Him to minister to them, it was necessary for them to sit down so they might receive from Him what He was prepared to give. And He said that is what worship and our worship service is all about. We've been pushing and surging all week long at work, at school, amongst friends and enemies alike. And now, on Sundays, the time we gather, it's a time for us to sit down and wait in readiness for what God has to give to us. See, the church is designed to help people love God more. And its second task is to help us love each other more. Looking back at 1 Peter 3 again, he says, you should be like one big happy family, full of sympathy toward each other, loving one another with tender hearts and humble minds. Don't repay evil for evil. Don't snap back at those who say unkind things about you. Instead, pray for God's help for them. For we are to be kind to others, and God will bless us for it. Amen. One big happy family. Here we see the real strength of the church. It is the love that we share for each other. If we could somehow help people know that such love exists, what a remarkable thing that would be. Bennett Cerf, who many remember as one of the panelists from the program What's My Line, once was asked, what's the most thing that you're afraid of? And his reply is, I have to admit the one thing I'm most afraid of is not being loved. See, I think there's a lot of people in this world that deal with this fear. They only know, if they only knew, that the church is not only people loving God, but also people loving each other, would they still feel that fear? There are a lot of people in this world. A lot of people that struggle with that. In his book, Rebuild Your Life, Dale Galloway tells about an experience when he was a custodian of a large church. And he was a student, he was a student at Olivet College in Illinois. He writes this. He says, one Saturday, I was cleaning the church sanctuary. I had the windows open and a little bird flew in. Once inside, that bird flew around, having a big time looking over the huge church. What an adventure, so exciting and so new. But then all of a sudden, it dawned on the little bird that he was trapped inside the sanctuary. At least it seemed that way to me as I watched him. Then he began to fly back and forth through the air, looking for some way out of the church building. I found myself wanting to help the trapped, panic-stricken bird, but after a while he landed upstairs in the balcony. So I ran upstairs. You would have thought I was crazy if you were watching me. I reached up to pick the little bird up, but he took off again. Back downstairs I went, from one end of the church to the other, following him. Up against the top of the window it hit, trying to escape its captivity, but it still couldn't find its way out. And the struggle went on for a while. Then, in utter exhaustion, giving up, the bird fell to the floor. He was not dead, but he must have felt half dead. So I walked over to where he was, knelt down, and gently reached out my hands and picked up the fallen bird. I carried the bird in my hand over to the window and opened my hands. The little bird flapped his wings and then suddenly flew away with restored vigor and new life. He was free to fly and climb the heights again. Dale Galloway goes on to write this. He says, just a few years ago I was broken, torn apart emotionally, trying this way and that way to find a solution. Then one day I was completely exhausted. Not knowing what to do or how to get out of my situation, I fell into the loving hands of my Heavenly Father. And He picked me up. He nursed my wounds with His love. He held me close to His heart. He healed me of all my brokenness and made me whole. God has set me free to fly to the heights again. We have seen this. In this family, we've seen God do that for people here and people in our lives. So often He uses the church to lift the broken and the bruised bird to life and freedom again. Look around this room this morning for someone who needs your love. Look around your life to see who needs your love. Maybe it's a painfully shy child or a teenager who desperately needs a word of encouragement. Someone who has had deep disappointment or deep hurt. Someone who has been ravaged by sickness or the loss of a loved one. There is only one kind of church that has enough electricity to cause 100 people or 1,000 people to jump at once. And that's a church where people truly love and care for each other. Bishop Fulton Sheen was once asked a missionary from one of the islands of the Pacific what was the greatest virtue of the people he helped there. And he answered, I can tell you their greatest virtue comes in terms of what they regard as their greatest vice. It's called kaipo. He says, translated, which is the sin of eating alone. Some of them would go without food for 2 or 3 days until they could find someone with which to share their blessing. Now think about that for a moment. The sin of eating alone. It is no accident that the very center of the Christian faith, there's a table where the believers break bread and drink of the cup together. Our first task is to love God, but our second task is to love each other. The obvious next step is then to love the world for which Jesus died. Now, the truth is, this is a whole lot harder than the first two. Because this means loving people that sometimes absolutely hate you and wish you harm. John 15 from this morning, Jesus says, this is my commandment, that you love one another. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me first. You're called to love. Love even if you only get hate in return. Man, these are tough words. This is a tough idea. Well, it is a new commandment after all. To love the world that Christ died for. You may have heard the story of a 5-year-old who attended a regular worship service for some time, or for the first time. The preacher is one of those who rants and raves and roars when he preaches, and the pulpit was shaped like a box in which he stood. And when the preacher got all warmed up that morning, he started pacing back and forth like a tiger in a cage, and he pounded the pulpit and he shook his fist. And the youngster became frightened, and he turned to his grandmother and whispered, he said, Grandma, what are we going to do if he ever gets out of there? Well, a religion that never gets out of the pulpit or the pew, or goes out of the door to the world outside, has never properly understood the gospel. That God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. That's the gospel. It is for the world that the church exists. See, we've been called into this family of faith, and our job is to throw open the doors and invite lost and weary souls inside for food and comfort. They will know you're my disciples by your love. Does the world see your love? Well, let's start smaller. Does your family see your love for them? You know, we've been given a tremendous gift. One that is not meant to be wasted, but shared with everyone. It's the gift of love. It's a powerful and illuminating energy that has the ability to flow from your heart to countless others without losing its strength. In fact, with love, the more you give, the stronger it becomes. You ever been through one of those pay it forward lines? Sometimes they say it goes on for hours at Starbucks. I think you'd like to be the guy that breaks that thing. It's like, thanks, they've just been paying for food for everyone ahead of them for 2 hours. No, I'm good. I'm not paying for the guy behind me. This house is powered with love. And this family will always strive to know God and to make Him known. Because there are so many out there who are suffering in need of what we have. Ted Engstrom tells about a man whose life seemed doomed from the start. He had been born to a dominating, unloving mother who worked long hours and often left him at home by himself. The neighborhood children rejected him as well. He was small and unattractive. He failed in school and eventually dropped out, in spite of a high IQ. He went into the Marines, but the other Marines rejected him and even laughed at him. He had no discipline and he didn't know how to respond to authority. He was soon court-martialed and discharged from the armed services. So he moved to another country, hoping to get a fresh start. He married a young woman who had also come from a difficult family situation, and she belittled him as well. He was an object of contempt in her eyes, and nothing he did could ever satisfy her. The two of them returned to America, and he tried everything to win her respect, but never succeeded. So one day, this man went to work at a job in a bookstore storage building, but only that day he took a gun with him. And the rest, they say, is history. You see, this man was Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated President John Kennedy. What difference can you and I make to someone today that might change their world tomorrow? This is the new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Let us be known as a church and a people who love and care for each other. And if we do, we will see God do tremendous things within our community. Amen.
Amen.